see more of the Earth, you often see little gray tiles, gray squares, before those portions of the map have downloaded. But thanks to Ajax, the code Google wrote in JavaScript can ask google.com, give me more tiles, give me more tiles. Sometimes that takes a few seconds if the network is slow, and that's why those tiles only gradually appear. Twitter and Facebook and Gmail and GChat, all of these tools that you might use that update themselves over time are using Ajax to go get more data. Rewind 10, 15 years when you had sites like MapQuest, which still exists, and I think you still use it in the same way. When you click the up arrow or the down or the left or the right arrow to move the map, it would reload the whole darn page. That's before the days of Ajax. So Ajax lets us create the illusion of dynamically changing content without having to force reload some whole page. All right, so here's a picture that makes it less clear. So we have a user interface, namely the browser, use some JavaScript in step 1. And this is actually worth knowing, or at least tucking away. The feature of JavaScript that makes this possible is called an XML HTTP request object. So much like we saw geolocation, much like we saw the local storage, this is another keyword introduced to JavaScript a few years ago that allows us to make these asynchronous calls back to the server. All right. Once you have instantiated one of those objects, as we'll see, you send an HTTP request to the server. Can't do that anymore. Send an HTTP request to the server. It responds years ago with XML data, and occasionally still today. And then your JavaScript code parses this thing called XML. If unfamiliar, XML is like homemade HTML. It's make your own tags, make your own attributes. But there's a simpler format these days called JSON, JSON, which is more popular and lighter weight. So when you get this XML back, you then do something with it. So this is a cryptic 5-step way of explaining how Google and Facebook and GChat and Twitter go about dynamically updating their DOMs without reloading the whole page. They're just making more HTTP requests across the wire. And we can probably see this. What might be, let's see if I can pick a site that without logging in would do this for us. What is a site that could do this? Google Live Stream? No, that doesn't work.
Probably go to someone's Twitter page and just wait for it to.
Twitter. Yeah.
Based on a hashtag.
Who's a famous? Well, no, that won't work. We need someone. Almost every site on the internet does this today, and I can't think of one.
Just go to Twitter and find some trending topic. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. What's trending? Let's choose something acceptable. Oh, only I am seeing the material. There we go. All right. What's happening right now? What's popular today? News. All right. 5 hours ago or 3 minutes ago. Well, let's see. There must be some aspect here. Let's see if we can cheat. This is a horrible demo. OK, so let me fake the story, and then I'll come better equipped. I will stop doing spontaneous demos is what I'll do. So what I did was I opened the same tool that we opened earlier, which is Chrome's Inspector tab. And again, Safari and IE and Firefox have these same kinds of tools. And oh, there we go. And I clicked on the Network tab because, as I expected, we would have this little row appear here, and if we waited long enough, so what happened is apparently Twitter's JavaScript code is making an Ajax call every half a minute, however often that's going to flash on the screen. And if I hover on this, you can see that the URL that was requested was this long one here, twitter.com/i/search. And that is because Twitter instantiated one of those XML HTTP request objects and just made an HTTP request from the client-side JavaScript code that I downloaded a minute ago back to their servers, presumably checking for more tweets. And there might not be new tweets, but they're at least polling their servers to check for some amount of time. And indeed, if I click on this request, we won't go into much detail here on this, but you can see all of the HTTP headers. You can see exactly what came back in the response. Apparently, there were more items. There's a key called has more items. So Twitter is actually using JSON, JavaScript object notation, instead of XML. But any site, if you are a Facebook user, Gmail, GChat user tonight, use Chrome, log into one of those websites, and just watch the Network tab of the Chrome Inspector, and and you'll see pretty constant traffic. Certainly if there's a busy site or if you're chatting back and forth with friends, you'll see all of these HTTP requests. This is arguably what makes the web or web development really interesting these days, in that you can make much, much more dynamic sites as a result. So this site, as we'll see, allows me to get a stock quote. Let me type in something like GOOG, which is the ticker symbol for Google, get quote, and there's an error with the AJAX call. So why might this be? So let me go back over here to my, let's see how to do this. Let's open AJAX 0. That's why. Typo. GOOG, get quote. There we go. So I renamed the file earlier and forgot to change it in the HTML. So apparently, as of 4:30 p.m. or so today, the Google stock price is $869.79. So I did not know that in advance, though technically I could have just hard-coded this, I suppose, after 4:30 p.m. for a 6:30 class. But this was, in fact, fetched dynamically. And if you use the same demo tomorrow morning, you would get a different answer slightly. And certainly for other websites, we could get back different stock quotes. So let's see how this is working underneath the hood. If I view the page source, let's scroll down to the easier part first. There's some HTML at the bottom. And it's really just a super simple form that borrows some of the lessons learned from earlier. On submit, call what function? Quote. This isn't a built-in function. This is apparently one I wrote up above that we'll look at in a second. Return false so that it doesn't actually submit to the server in the traditional way. So AJAX is all about sending data to the server. It's just I don't want it to be submitted via that form per se. I want it to be submitted via my code, my event handler up above. So this symbol is an input. Autocomplete is off. It has an ID of, let's scroll to the right, quote-unquote symbol. That's probably going to be useful. So I can uniquely identify what the user typed in. So let me zoom out and scroll back up. And you're going to see some mess of a code. And here, too, jQuery will make our lives better. So at the top of my script tag, I have a variable called XHR. Could have called it anything, XML HTTP request, initializing it to null, just so that the variable exists for me. Down here, I have a function called quote with some simple comments above it to remind me. And now we have kind of a mess of code that, again, is dramatically simplified by libraries. But I'm going to try to instantiate a new XML HTTP request object. If something goes wrong, something called an exception is going to be thrown. The browser specifically, if it has no idea what this symbol is, XML HTTP request, because I'm using Netscape 1.0 or many versions of IE, it will throw an exception that I am prepared to catch. If I do catch it, I am going to reasonably, but not definitively, assume that it's what browser? So there's a lot of this kind of code on the internet because IE 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 to some extent have not always played so nicely with certain standards. And all the browsers kind of cut corners here and there. But this is just an example of error checking code. And what jQuery will do for us in just a few moments is collapse all of this messiness and all of this care about what browser the user is using into a simple function call. But what's really going on underneath the hood is something like this. So this is raw JavaScript code. I proceed to check if the XHR object is null, then I'm going to return an alert saying AJAX is not supported in your browser, but we didn't see that. And then down here, I'm going to do just a little bit more work to make this magic happen. I'm going to declare a variable called URL, whose value is quote.php. It happens to be written in PHP, but that's just because it's a language I know. I'm running it on a PHP-supported server. XAMPP comes with support for PHP. Question mark symbol equals, and then what am I concatenating on is the value of that URL, its parameter, whatever the symbol's value is that the user typed into the DOM. So the only thing new in this example besides the exception handling stuff is the fact that I'm using PHP, but we're not even going to look at the PHP code. Just know that it's returning dynamically a price using some PHP code talking to Yahoo Finance in real time. Yes, we will simplify all of this code in a moment with jQuery to get rid of most of these lines. So the last thing I need to do is actually contact the server. All I've done thus far is create a string, a variable, that is a URL. Now I need to do something with that URL. So I need these 3 lines. My XHR object, which again is my sort of gateway to the server for this feature called AJAX, Horrible property name, onReadyStateChange. What am I going to call? Call my handler function. So in a moment, we'll see a function called handler. And this is just my way of saying, hey, special object, when you change state, when you turn on, when you turn off, call this function so I can check what's going on, is what that boils down to. Open is opening a TCP connection to the server, HTTP specifically connection using the get method if familiar. If not, don't worry. It's the opposite of post. To this URL, making the call asynchronous. Asynchronous means this function will return immediately, and handler will get called when the server, if the server eventually replies. By contrast, if we made this false and said make the open call synchronous, that